Today, the nation pauses to honor the life of one of the most influential people of the 20th century, civil rights giant and public servant, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's view on nonviolence and equality has had an enormous impact on our community, our nation, and our world. For more than 4 decades, the MLK Observance Day Association of Savannah has celebrated Dr. King's life, legacy, and contributions, and WSAV has been right there with them. In fact, WSAV was the first local station to bring you the MLK Observance Day Parade live on air. Since that time, we haven't missed a single broadcast. This year is no different. Of course, due to COVID-19, our presentation is a little different, but our commitment to honoring Dr. King continues. This morning, we're attempting to bring all of those years of celebrations into 1 hour-long special. We'll take a look back at some of the most memorable sights and sounds and hear from leaders and community members as they reflect on the dream and our pursuit of it. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s tremendous influence on the civil rights movement was far-reaching, but it was also felt right here in Savannah. Former Mayor Edna Jackson had the honor of hearing Dr. King recite his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. News 3's Ashley Williams sat down with her to explore the leader's local impact.
Oh, you know, he was an orator, and just to hear him talk was, I was mesmerized by it because he knew what we needed to do.
Before Edna Jackson became the first black woman to lead the hostess city, the former Savannah mayor was a civil rights activist who first joined the NAACP at just 9 years old. Among the notable figures who influenced her activism, including Wesley Wallace Law, was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
It was the early part of the 60s when he came to Savannah, because I was still in high school.
Jackson says when Dr. King visited Savannah, he seemed impressed with the progress community leaders had already made.
I think it's behind the scenes activity where he saw what we were doing, that he was able to say, Savannah does not need me here. They have excellent leadership. You see, what he saw was there was really a plan of what we wanted to do, the kind of accomplishments that we wanted to have.
Accomplishments, Jackson says, like establishing equal job opportunities for African Americans.
They didn't want to hire. We could cut the meat, but we couldn't ring the registers. So we boycotted grocery stores.
Jackson says while Dr. King may have only stopped in Savannah a short time, his work left a significant mark upon the city and its civil rights leaders.
Even though he may not have been one of the fighters here in our community, many of the leaders from this community joined him. It's a long transition where people were trained here, but they went on and they became leaders in their own rights.
The leaders Dr. King influenced include Hosea Williams and Benjamin Van Clark. Dr. King's achievements also left an impression on Reverend Dr. Benny R. Mitchell, who served as pastor for Connors Temple Baptist Church in Savannah. He was also founder and chairman emeritus of the Observance Day Association for Martin Luther King Jr festivities of Savannah.
He fought hard, very hard, to have a commemoration of Martin Luther King. He fought for the naming of the street there, and he never gave up. So we started the celebrations here, and they have continued here.
While the traditional celebration of Dr. King's legacy is on pause this year, Jackson says his imprint on the city of Savannah will continue to be felt for years to come.
We can never forget King. We can never forget what he did across this nation.
Ashley Williams, WSAV News 3 on your side.
"I Have a Dream" remains one of history's greatest speeches, but before Dr. King delivered it at the March on Washington in August of 1963, he tested it out at several places across the coastal empire and low country, including Dorchester Academy in Midway, a sanctuary for Dr. King and others who sought peace not for themselves, but for an entire nation. The historic site in Liberty County hosted Dr. King's planning meetings for the 1963 March on Birmingham, Alabama. Those are the days State Representative Al Williams won't soon forget. As a boy, it was at Dorchester where he met Dr. King, a brief encounter that had a lasting impression on his life.
Here, we used to come and meet. The night Dr. King walked in and did a little bit of the I Have a Dream, we were right here, and I was seated like right here. And we were in a semicircle, and we were all discussing different issues, and Dr. King came in through that door and walked. It's absolutely amazing how I can feel his presence. He walked across that stage and came down those steps, and we were all mesmerized by his presence, and he insisted, no, you all continue, but who could continue?
What an incredible story, but that's not the only one. The Low Country also has a connection to Dr. King. He and other luminaries of the civil rights movement met with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at the historic Penn Center on St. Helena Island several times between 1964 and 1967. It's where he composed many of his speeches, including I Have a Dream, which he wrote while staying in the Hastings Gant Cottage, where it said he often retreated. In December of 1967, Dr. King held his fifth and final meeting with the SCLC at Penn. 4 months later, on April 4, 1968, he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. The center still houses several mementos and items of Dr. King's, including his official obituary.
Well, hello, Savannah, Georgia. How wonderful it is to celebrate with you and to observe the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As a child of Savannah, Georgia, some of my most vivid memories, actually, are of the celebrations around Dr. King. I grew up in a generation in which our parents were fighting for the holiday. And even before there was a holiday, they would pull us out of school on his birthday. I remember the teach-ins at the May Street YMCA, where I first encountered Dr. King, his work, his ministry, his voice, and it absolutely inspired me and began to set me on the road towards ministry and public service. I remember climbing into the top of the seating area in the arena at the Savannah Civic Center, where on King Day, some of the great speakers, preachers, including the Reverend Jesse Jackson and others in the 1980s would come and speak. It captured my moral imagination, inspired me as a young person. And years later, I would become the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. And now I have the privilege of representing you and the rest of our state in the United States Senate. Please know that this child of Savannah will keep you in mind, inspired by the words of Dr. King, who said, "We are tied in a single garment of destiny, caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. What affects one directly affects all indirectly in this difficult and divided time in our nation. We must stand together. Democrats, Republicans, and independents, red, yellow, brown, black, and white, we're all children of God." And so, in memory of the one who died standing up for garbage collectors, standing up for workers, let us fight for the dignity of work. Let us ensure that people have access to affordable health care. Let's build a beloved community together. God bless you. Long live the memory and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. Let us rise up in this moment and continue his work.
Welcome back. This year's national and local MLK celebration theme is the urgency of creating the beloved community. While the Martin Luther King Jr Observance Day Association of Savannah has suspended most of its 10 events of its 42nd annual celebration, the organization will honor local graduating seniors and its 501c3 Give Back recipients virtually this year, and is leading an MLK Giving campaign to raise money for these efforts through the end of the month. Your donation will help provide scholarships to deserving students and local small businesses. Donations can be mailed or dropped off at 1206 MLK Jr Boulevard, Savannah, Georgia, 31415. For more information, call 912-234-5502. Savannah isn't the only community celebrating the King holiday a little differently because of the pandemic. Tybee MLK Human Rights Organization prepared a completely virtual celebration this year. The annual parade and other in-person events are on hold. Members of the organization still found a way to celebrate Dr. King's legacy, all while inspiring the next generation.
Well, I believe that the celebration this year is going to look the same as it has before, because the passion and the opportunity to celebrate Martin Luther King is still here. We're just going to use a different medium to do it, so it will be virtual.
The discussion started last spring when COVID hit, whether we would have the parade and the actual Human Rights Forum in 2021, and early on it was decided not to have the parade just because of it would be drawing more people to Tybee. There was some discussion for a good while about having the Human Rights Forum still in the Tybee Old School, where we always have it, and with distancing and with spacing of people attending. But then in the last few months we decided that was also too risky, and also didn't want to have the students traveling down here with their families, and basically for the general COVID background reasons, we decided a few months ago to have it totally virtual.
Well, Ann Levette, who's the superintendent of the Chatham School District, gets information regarding the contest, and that's sent to, she then filtrates that out to all of the schools. The students that are interested write back to us a speech. The speeches are collected. We have 7 judges on our volunteer committee that review all of the speeches, and while everyone's a winner, we do award a cash prize to those that win at the middle school and the high school level, 3 of each.
The student presentations have always been a part of the Human Rights Forum, the event that's an hour long event in the Tybee Old School at the end of the parade. There's always been a blend of current leaders, civic leaders, political leaders, public service people, ministers speaking about their connection to MLK's ideals and principles, and then there's been pretty much a 50% split with then emphasis on new leaders, upcoming new voices, those being middle school and high school students. And so those the students, the program has never been without student voices, and they've been like an important part of it. And so that's the way it's been since the beginning, and it's such a good way for us, Tybee MLK, or the adult community, to hear the students, and then for the students to get exposure to the local political leaders, the local people that have some that share their interests.
Hi, I'm Van Johnson, Mayor of the City of Savannah. The MLK national and local theme, the urgency of creating the beloved community, could not be more poignant or more appropriate than at this very moment. Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of peoplehood. This pandemic has exposed every socioeconomic vulnerability in our community. Those that were hungry or homeless found their situation exacerbated, and others who were reasonably okay before March of 2020 have found themselves in a much different place, a much different situation than they would have ever conceived. I believe that God has allowed us this time of social distancing to realize just how much we really need each other and how important every single person is to the human equation. In Savannah, we have actively working together to ensure that no citizen will be poor, hungry, or homeless, and we will continue to work until we get it done. We will condemn racism, discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice in all of its forms, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because our very survival depends on it to be the beloved community I know Savannah can be. We can do it, starting today. Wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your distance, and happy King Day.
There's nothing like MLK Day in Savannah. The sights, the sounds, and sheer exuberance of our city coming together to celebrate Dr. King's enduring legacy is what makes our celebration one of the biggest and best in the nation. Let's pause to look back at some of the most memorable moments of last year's parade, shared with News 3's Ben Katko, former Savannah Mayor Dr. Otis Johnson, and myself.
We're at the 40th annual MLK Day Parade.
Taking a look now at Savannah State University, the college by the sea, or should I say the university by the sea. Back in the day it was a college, now university.
Oh yeah, and we're looking at the NROTC unit, and this unit has produced some outstanding graduates who have gone on to become generals and admirals and hold all different ranks in the Marine Corps and in the Navy, and it is a wonderful, wonderful addition to Savannah State.
Now we're taking a look now at a trolley that is familiar to a lot of folks here in Savannah. Richard Arnold High School, that's the Alumni Association. Of course, they are the mighty Soaring Eagles. They have on their float 1958 until 1986. I remember when Richard Arnold High School was a force to be reckoned with. Taking a look now at Omar Temple number 21.
Now this is always a fun group with the little cars.
The little cars.
Yeah. They have.
There we go.
They have a lot of fun.
And you notice that their float is empty because a lot of the guys who are on that float are actually off the float, marching through the streets.
That's right. And I mean they strutting too.
Those little cars, that's the way to do a parade right there.
Oh man.
Now you know this group has shrine clubs in Hinesville, Beaufort, here in Savannah. Omar Temple number 21 was organized under the name Oman Temple back in 1906. And in 1930, Oman Temple was reorganized under their new name, Omar Temple number 21, with Saucy Johnson as its illustrious potentate. For folks who may not know, we're here in the parking lot of the Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum right here on MLK Jr Boulevard. To the north of us is the Earl T. Shinholster overpass, and just down the street, Connors Temple Baptist Church, where it all started. Former Savannah Mayor Dr. Otis Johnson here with us, as you have been for the past, how many years is this now?
This is the third year.
This is your third year with us. Of course, many people took this seat. We can't go on with this parade without mentioning several of them. Reverend Benny R. Mitchell, Sage Brown.
Right.
We've even had George Shinholster sit in to fill in the position at this chair. Folks who lived through the civil rights movement here in Savannah, who personally knew Dr. King, and there are so many people whose names we haven't been able to call who were involved in the struggle.
That is the unsung heroes that we talk about, those nameless and faceless people who Dr. King wouldn't have been successful without, because you had to have demonstrators. You know, he could lead the march, but you had to have people in the march, and they're the ones that really we have to continue to lift up as those unsung heroes.
Now we see
and sheroes.
And sheroes. You're right about that. And sheroes. We're taking a look at the J.C. Lewis Primary Health Care Center trolley, but right behind them, we see a big trophy being carried by the Frank McAllen Boys and Girls Club. These are young people, and I see Michael Hamilton there in front of some of the young people. This is an organization that's been around in our community for quite some time.
Oh, a long time, and they have produced.
Right now, you're taking a look at the Southwest Middle School cheer team. They're made up of a group of talented girls who exemplify leadership roles in and out of the classroom. They say they're a team that enjoys cheering, supporting, and pumping up the crowds at football games, basketball games, and community events. We're happy to have them here.
We certainly are. Let's go Southwest Middle School.
Yeah.
Great job, great job. You know what? We're cold right here,
cold.
but I think that Edward Moody is not as cold because he's been running up and down the street, working up a sweat. Okay, hold on, wait a minute. Let's put some Warriors in it.
All right.
We are taking a look
Yeah.
at my alma mater.
All right.
The Jenkins High School, home of the Mighty Warriors. And let me just say, last night we inducted our 4th class of Hall of Famers.
All right.
10 new inductees this year, to include Savannah State University's own Dr. Jamal Toure,
Excellent.
Tasha Adams Fox, a number of other individuals as well who have gone on to do great things, not only in our community, but throughout our entire world. And just want to give them a shout out right now as they head down the street, because we're going to listen.
This year, we're unable to have our usual celebration of the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are experiencing a time in our country that we have never experienced before. We are suffering from a health pandemic, an economic recession, racial unrest, and a political insurrection. These are definitely trying times. In April 1963, Dr. King told us in his letter from a Birmingham jail that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In this country, we are experiencing a confluence of events that is testing its soul. We have drifted more apart from each other and forgotten the phrase "e pluribus unum," meaning out of many, one. Dr. King, in his letter, reminded us that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Now is the time when we celebrate the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to remember his prophetic words. Can we repair the soul of America? Can we build the beloved community? It is up to us. Let us be up to the task. Aluta continua.
Welcome back to our special Honoring MLK. More than 250,000 people gathered in front of the Lincoln Memorial in August of 1963 to participate in the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It was a massive event 20 years in the making that drew attention to the challenges and inequalities faced by African Americans in this country. Savannah's Richard Shinholster was there. He shared his experience with us back in 2013 on the historic march's 50th anniversary. The year was 1963. More than 250,000 people marched toward the Lincoln Memorial to rally for jobs and justice.
It was my first experience with a large-scale movement.
Richard Shinholster was one of them.
I had finished my sophomore year at Savannah State University. We had just gone through a lot of demonstrations and protests Bobby Hill, James Brown, Carolyn Quillen, those persons just led a successful protest movement at Savannah State, the first of its kind. So there was a taste there of empowerment, that we could have a voice. And then we began to hear about the March on Washington.
It was a movement of the masses. At the center, a charismatic preacher, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., delivering a passionate speech, one of hope for a better society.
Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
The last speech of the day was Dr. King. And when he began to speak, the whole demeanor of that crowd, that awesome crowd, changed. It was silent. The people were listening. And as he talked about the dream, I think there was a sense of inspiring people that we could have better, that there would be better.
It was a dream shared by many, but one that didn't happen overnight. Savannah's streets had been stirring since 1960, and by 1963, unrest was bubbling over.
Yes, this was the year, of course, that the Savannah High School as well as Groves High School was integrated. The year that Armstrong was integrated. Our former mayor, Otis Johnson, became the first student to attend Armstrong. There were marches along Martin Luther King Boulevard, nightly marches to the jail because so many of our friends and colleagues had been jailed. So in Savannah, there was this sense that we too want freedom. Martin Luther King Jr., I'd heard him speak once before, said that Savannah was the most integrated city in the South. And while that was a good statement, we felt that there were still colored-only signs in places, white-only signs in places. We could not eat at the lunch counters. Tybee was very segregated at that time, so there were wait-ins. The churches, this was the time when we decided, too, that the churches, which people said was the most segregated time in Savannah, was 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. That had to change. So in Savannah, there was just this wave of change going on.
That change ultimately resulted in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Despite progress, Shinholster says 50 years later, the focus of the fight for justice remains the same.
That dream is multifaceted. And while we look basically at the social aspects of that dream, one of the driving and determining factors of that dream is the economic component of that dream. Until people, more people, and especially people of color, can participate, can sit at the table of economic prosperity, the dream can't be realized.
We have all endured a difficult 2020, and we have unfortunately had to live through a traumatic beginning to the year 2021. During these days, we find ourselves struggling to make sense of all the issues we face. I personally, though, find solace in the fact that whenever we've struggled as a country, we found comfort in the words and actions of our great leaders of the past. We read time and again of how they overcame seemingly overwhelming obstacles through force of will and support from their contemporaries. Today, we mimic their responses to their times of turmoil as we turn to our friends and neighbors and together join in brotherly and sisterly camaraderie, and also join together to preach the ideals so eloquently spoken time and again by men and women like Dr. Martin Luther King. We remember Dr. King for his activism during the Civil Rights Movement, but his heroism continues to permeate our world during every single generation. We shall overcome remains a mantra for all those who want to improve our world, for all those willing to take action when action isn't so easy to take, for all of us today who hope to bring a nation divided together. The promise of America remains a promise worth all of our efforts. We thank men and women like Dr. King who helped us recognize that we can overcome our differences against any and all odds, and that we must strive for this future even if we may not see it ourselves. As Dr. King once said, "And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." I hope we all have the chance to see the promised land, but I pray even more that we continue to strive, struggle, and endure until we reach this goal. May we ever continue the struggle.
The Islamic community of Savannah, which is comprised of the members of Masjid Jihad and the Islamic Center of Savannah, joins our fellow citizens and our brothers and sisters of the Christian, Jewish, and those with other faiths in commemorating the life and sacrifices of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We believe that Dr. King, in his quest to achieve freedom, justice, and equality for the sons and daughters of our African ancestors who were slaves, was inspired by the following divine principles found in the Quran, the holy book of Muslims. Let them arise from among you a people that invites to good and enjoins what is right and forbids the wrong, and these are the ones that shall be successful.
Dr. King referred to Savannah as one of the most desegregated cities in the Deep South, but that doesn't mean it was without its problems or absent from the fight for civil rights. As a matter of fact, as we've shared throughout this broadcast, Dr. King spent a lot of time in the hostess city, the Coastal Empire, and the Low Country. He visited Savannah 3 times in 1964. He was also scheduled to speak 2 weeks before he was assassinated in 1968, but the trip was canceled because of bad weather. Did you know that the lone survivor of Savannah's original 9 African-American police officers, retired Lieutenant John White, served as Dr. King's bodyguard? Here's what he had to say back in 2007.
Well, in that particular night, he was supposed to speak at Grayson Stadium, and they had agents all over there, and it rained so hard. We came back and went over to St. Paul Church on Bonnet on 32nd Street. And then 3 weeks later, he was killed.
Some of the great questions facing our national discourse today are, how do we collectively move forward in the suffering of so many and create a new cohesion among all Americans? Reverend King once said, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality." He points toward 3 amazing pillars for healing. Unarmed truth tells us to present truth without agenda or protocol, simply unvarnished and unobscured. This builds common ground. Then unconditional love, which brings us to a place where our pursuit for human equity is exchanged and expanded, is obvious. But it is that 3rd element toward communal health that speaks loudest to us today. Beloved, our focus on this King Day can be identifying, chronicling, and addressing the reality of where we are as individuals and as a nation. Remembering we can climb no higher than our ability to recognize our collective reality. And now that so much truth is hopefully ushering toward our nation, let's embrace the reality and work toward improving and implementing it. So let's mindfully build coalitions for change, committees for corrections, and gatherings for greatness. We can do it. Happy King Day.
Welcome back. This year's national theme is the urgency of creating the beloved community. But back in 2012, Wendy Powell penned the local theme, A Dream from the Past, a Mission for the Future. Let's take a look back at some of the highlights from that parade.
A waving in Mrs. SSU 2012. There she is. I went to her coronation. Beautiful. She's smart.
Sure did, yeah.
She's in just the total package. Now, taking a look just a few seconds ago at the Joy 100 float, their sponsors, one of the many sponsors in this parade. There they go. They're waving. There's J. Chris.
I want to jump back to the different programs and efforts that are being sponsored locally to raise money for scholarships. I'd like to encourage everybody who's out today to visit, our sororities, our social groups, and to partake of their products to raise money so that we can educate our own students. That's right. Important.
And there's another trolley there. That's the historic Nicholsonboro Baptist Church that we see here, and that's located in Pinpoint, Georgia.
That's exactly right. Nicholson Baptist Church, very historic and profound church.
And the old sanctuary still stands. I did a piece on Nicholsonboro a while back, and so much history.
Yes.
So much history in that church.
Yes. I'm so overwhelmed by the accomplishment of our young folk. Sometimes I sit back and I look at them and I'm just in awe, because I believe our future is just so much brighter than we're led to believe.
That's right, and we're taking a look at that future right now. Loving Arms of Savannah Daycare. And there's the drum line. And they're breaking it down, Tracy. Here, Armstrong Atlantic State University honors the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Their representative, Melody Rodriguez, is on the trolley.
Armstrong makes a real strong effort to include, segments from all of the communities. I attended both Savannah State and Armstrong and graduated from both of them. So I'm supportive of both of these fine institutions.
You got a lot of alma maters out here today.
He does, doesn't he?
I count 4 now.
I hope you enjoyed that look back at the Savannah MLK Parade from 2012. It's hard to believe that was 9 years ago. Tracy Haynes and I had a wonderful time sharing the desk with local attorney and civil rights activist Sage Brown. Sage had a special way of sprinkling humor, insight, and encouraging words of peace and hope throughout our broadcast. For several years, Brown served as a commentator for WSAV's MLK Parade coverage, sharing his personal perspective on Savannah's fight for equality. He was a product of the civil rights movement and helped change the face of public education in Chatham County as one of 19 African-American students to desegregate the school system in 1963. Sage Brown passed away in August of 2015 after a battle with leukemia. He was one of many commentators to share the desk with us during our parade coverage. Others included civil rights activist George Shinholster, who worked alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and his brother Richard, who has for several years served as the first vice president of the Savannah chapter of the NAACP. Former Savannah mayor, educator, and author Dr. Otis Johnson, who you heard from earlier in the broadcast. And of course, the man who started it all, Reverend Benny R. Mitchell, Jr. Savannah's MLK Observance Day Association has operated continuously since 1985. Born out of Connors Temple Baptist Church at the corner of MLK Boulevard and Gwinnett Street. The late Reverend Benny Mitchell, along with a group of women at the church, started the organization as a way to pay tribute to Dr. King's life's work. It has since grown into a grand commemoration that spans several months through multiple events like the Business and Community Unity Brunch, Citywide Memorial Worship Service, Huxley Scott Jazz Concert, Gospel Festival, Memorial Scholarship Award, and the ML King Freedom Dinner Gala. The founding of Savannah's MLK Observance Day Association was inspired by longtime Savannah Economic Opportunity Authority Executive Director John Finney, who often challenged us to work for a better community. In January 1972, the local EOA began the first celebration among community agencies to keep Dr. Martin Luther King's memory alive. John Finney passed away in September of last year. He leaves behind an extraordinary legacy.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Savannah is an intense community-wide opportunity to celebrate, discuss, and reflect on Dr. King's legacy. It's a time to examine contemporary human issues through the lens of Dr. King's work and ideas broadly defined. It is a day of service, thought, reflection, and aspiration for our entire community. Each year, we look forward to a diverse array of impactful and meaningful cultural and informational MLK Observance Week activities across our area, state, and nation. After each activity, I am energized, motivated, excited, and hopeful. The entire observance experience reinforces my purpose and commitment to my work, as well as stimulate within me a sense of urgency. Though we are in the midst of a pandemic and unable to gather as we typically do, we can still celebrate the life and legacy that Dr. Martin Luther King left for all of us. We can do something as simple as teaching our children the power of gratefulness and equality to serving others through charity work and donations. There are many ways that Savannah-Chatham County families can remember and celebrate and carry on Dr. King's message of peace, freedom, and unity this month. However you choose to celebrate, I wish you a day of peace and love.
Today we celebrate the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's words remain true even today, over 50 years since his death. No truer words than these, given in Atlanta in 1967 to the Hungry Club Forum, has remained as relevant for today. Dr. King says, "Our moral lag must be redeemed. When scientific power outruns moral power, we end up with guided missiles and misguided men." As we celebrate this great man, may we also take heed to his words in redeeming our moral lag. We must again see one another as brothers and sisters, as Americans, as one. Our humanity must be seen above all else that divides us. Our moral fabric must be repaired, and it begins with us. For us to realize the dream of Dr. King, we must also embrace the methodology of his conviction. We honor him for his work, but more than that, we honor him for his vision. We now carry the torch to continue the work that he started, to realize the dream that he envisioned.
From Dr. King's birthplace of Atlanta, Georgia, to the nation's capital and right here at home, Americans of all walks of life and backgrounds are honoring his legacy today. Dr. King helped to change the world through his mission of peace and message of unity. Let's continue what he started. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully next year we'll see each other face to face to experience the sights and sounds of the beloved community together. We leave you with a special message from the president of the Martin Luther King Jr Observance Day Association of Savannah, Carolyn Blackshear.
Greetings. Happy King Day. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. helped change the world with his mission of peace and message of unity. It is this legacy that the Martin Luther King Jr. Observance Day Association has celebrated for the past 41 years. We have operated with the purpose of serving all factions of our community and ensuring that Dr. King's goal of eradicating poverty and injustice prevail. Last year was a trying one for all of us, but we are still committed to keep Dr. King's dream alive with the assistance of our like-minded community partners like you. Considering the concerns of the ongoing pandemic, the association has suspended most of its 10 events of this 42nd annual celebration. We will still honor virtually our local graduating seniors and our 501c3 Give Back recipients. Instead, the association is leading an MLK giving campaign, December 2020 through January 2021. We're inviting our sponsors, supporters, and the general public to join us in this effort. Please consider continuing your annual support at any level. These funds will enable us to provide our scholarship and community give-back programs. Donations can be mailed or dropped off at our office at 1206 MLK Jr Boulevard, Savannah, Georgia, 31415. Your donations will be acknowledged and promoted through our virtual education efforts and preparation for the 2022 celebration. During this year, we will direct our planning time and energy to overhaul, renew, and rebrand the association to return in 2022 in its old glory and beyond. Regardless of the things that separate us, we have more things in common with one another. Let us focus on nonviolence, race relations, and equal rights for all of us. Our national MLK theme is the urgency of creating the beloved community. Thank you for your continued support. Happy King Day, and stay safe.